when we are live.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Just a quick introduction. I'm Liz Sanders. I'm the director of Nexus. On our call tonight, joining us are our Nexus managers. Our Nexus manager, Casey Nieder, is kind of our behind the scenes guru. She does all of our video production. So she's made all this happen, and a huge thank you to her, because we really hope that this is an informative session for everyone that's here tonight. Taylor Rideout is our junior manager, and she's really done a lot with all of our design pieces. So a lot of what you see tonight on the screen came from Taylor's work. Our team together now for almost a full year, and it's just been outstanding to work together to make Nexus the best that we possibly can. The majority of our regional staff is also on the call tonight, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions in the chat if you have them. We're hoping that I have most of the answers that you need, and that they will be able to answer any outstanding questions that you have, and we'll kind of walk through how that process will work in just a minute. I'm going to introduce our regional team. Not everyone is here with us tonight, but you'll see on your screen we have our contact information for our regional team, and it's really important that everyone kind of gets to know these people, because depending on where you are in the country, to get the most out of Nexus, you want to be able to contact those that manage where you live locally. So up in Region 3 and 4, all of our teams are built out of all of our regions are built out of a team group now. So we have an administrative manager and a coach manager in all of our super regions, and then Region 11 kind of stands alone because of its geography. So up in Region 3 and 4, we have our admin manager, who is Jess Bergen. You can see her email address there. Jess is also the head field hockey coach at Westfield State. We have our coach manager, who is Carrie Cadu, email address on the screen, and she is the assistant coach at Yale. In Region 5 and 6, our admin manager is Sarah Ellman, and she's the head coach at Stockton University in New Jersey. And our coach manager is Nikki Hitchens, who's the associate head coach at Drexel in Philadelphia. In Region 7 and 8, we have our admin manager, who is Ann Andrews, and she actually kind of lives bi-coastally. So she lives in Region 7 portion of the year, and then she's the head coach at Sewanee as well. So she travels a little bit, but she's going to be doing all of our admin pieces. And our coach manager is Nicole Morgan, who resides in Virginia Beach and is a little jack of all trades. She does some private coaching and also some high school and club coaching as well. In Region 9 and 10, our admin manager is Jill Dixon, and she is the assistant coach at Central Michigan University. And our coach manager is Val Lohr, who is the director of student well-being and performance mindset at St. Mary's Hall. That's in San Antonio. She also coaches field hockey there. And then in Region 11, we have our admin manager, Lisa Griffiths, who is the owner and director of Western Elite Field Hockey Club out in Denver. And our coach manager is Michelle Vandenbroek, who does a couple of things. She runs San Francisco Youth Field Hockey and also coaches high school this year. So we really hope that you get to know all those people real personally. They work hard to make sure that Nexus is delivered on a regional level that really meets the needs of all of our participants. So if there's anything specific to where you're going to be located in Nexus, or the site that you're going to be assigned to, your best bet is to reach out to them directly. Tonight, I'm hoping to really just kind of set the frame for Nexus, describe some exciting things that we're bringing to the table this year for the first time, and kind of some of the processes that have become a part of the Nexus brand over the first 2 years of its inception and now into our third year. So I'm going to pass to Casey, who is just going to quickly walk you through some housekeeping and how this webinar will go tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. As Liz mentioned before, I'm more of the producer guru. Just gonna give you some more housekeeping rules here for those of you that haven't used the Teams Live event before. If you are logged in, you should be able to see a Q&A little box option at the top right hand of your corner screen. You're going to go there to send any comments, questions that you have throughout the presentation tonight. If you're having any technical issues, please just first try to refresh totally. That usually does the trick. If you are still having some problems, send it in the chat and I can try to help you out and solve that for you. We are recording tonight, so for any reason you're joining late or you have to leave early, we'll be sending that link out tomorrow at some point, and we'll also have it on our website and some social media platforms. And any specific regional questions will be answered hopefully by your regional manager in the chat tonight. If for some reason it requires a longer answer, they'll probably just send you their email information for you to converse there. I believe that's it. Liz, I'll send it back to you.
Awesome. So we just want to first say we recognize that on the call tonight, we likely have returning Nexus participants that have been with us one of the first 2 years of Nexus, and hopefully we have quite a few people that are interested in joining Nexus for the first time. So what we're going to do is just kind of walk you through how the Nexus process works from registration all the way through to the Nexus Championship event. A new and exciting piece that we're introducing this year, and one of the things that we're probably the most proud of, is we're going to change up the registration process. It's been a bit clumsy through our database over the last couple of years, and we knew that there had to be a better way of doing things. And most importantly, we want to give our athletes choice. So starting in 2023, every player that registers for Nexus, whether you're a first-year player or a third-year player, you will now be able to choose the site at which you participate in Nexus within your region. I'm really familiar with Region 8 because I was a regional manager there for a really long time, so I'm going to use that as my example. If you are a Region 8 participant, which is North Carolina, Virginia, and Point South, in Region 8, there's going to be a few different sites. So for example, if you live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, you basically live within the location of 2 sites. You could drive up to Northern Virginia for Nexus, or you could drive to Richmond, Virginia for Nexus. And the best way for us to serve you is to give you the choice at which site you're going to go. So when you log in now, you will choose your site from a drop-down menu. The sites will have a max number of athletes that it will be able to accommodate. And so we really recommend that you, if you're a returning player, register for Nexus at the first opportunity that you get once registrations are live in early January. And you'll get to pick your site and off you'll go. There'll be no more invite to the process, multi-step, things like that. So for our returning players, that process we hope to begin around January 4th. That's the plan right now. For our new participants, there's a couple of things that will be new for our new participants. The first is the choice of your site. Same process, you'll choose your site from a drop-down menu. Be limited to the sites that are within your region. So you will not be able to sign up for a site in a different region, but you'll have multiple options within your own. And then you'll be able to sign up for that site. I'm going to segue there to the next slide, which is going to walk through the player assessment. I want to just point out that on that previous slide, there was a note that our financial aid applications will continue for 2023. Huge thank you to everyone that participates in our fundraising event each summer at the Nexus Championships. We've had a few questions around financial aid. It appears that financial aid is not available this year. That's just because we don't make that application live until registration is live. So closer to January 4th, the financial aid application will go live on our website and you will fill that out. It will actually eventually get back to Casey and she will take care of processing our financial aid. We do not want costs to be prohibitive to any player in the country. We want anyone that wants to do Nexus to be able to be a part of it. So just a quick side note there. On the next slide, you're going to see a new really important thing that we're doing this year, and it is a self-assessment that helps you get into Nexus into the appropriate group. So for those of you that are new to the program, Nexus is built around a 4 performance group situation. So you can see on the screen, our 4 performance groups are called Emerge, Aspire, Perform, and Elite, both externally facing you whenever you are going to do this self-assessment, and when coaches have done coach assessments in the past, there is a corresponding 1 through 4, and you can see how those are associated with each of the performance groups. On the screen and also on the Nexus website under What is Nexus, you can read through what the description of each of these performance categories are. we think that the most important piece to the performance category is kind of setting the context at which you want to rate yourself, or which in the past a coach has rated you. The important piece here is that this is in the context of the junior high performance pathway. So the most elite player that we are comparing ourselves to on this scale is a player that's currently on our junior national team, getting ready to represent USA this spring on a foreign tour, potentially at the Pan American Championships. So you can see that even emerging athletes at Nexus are still players that are familiar with the game. They understand fundamentals. They might need a little bit more work on basic skills. But I think it's important to set that stage. Sometimes a misunderstanding that an emerging player is more of a beginner type athlete. And I think what hopefully those of you who have been in Nexus for a few years recognize is that we don't have a ton of beginners in the program anymore. We've really raised the overall level, and we want to make sure that we're rating ourselves on this scale. So the way the self-assessment will work, if you are new to the program, you're going to log in, you're going to choose to register for Nexus, and in that application process, it's going to ask for your self-assessment across these 4 categories. It will give you a brief description of what it means to be in each, and you can choose the performance category that you think best fits yourself. We recognize, especially because Nexus is open to players as young as 11 or 12, that we have parents and coaches and other support staff or support people that will be aiding our athletes in making this self-assessment. So we encourage you to have conversations across the spectrum of the people that support your development to make sure that you're assessing the best that you can. I think the other really important piece, and one of the things that I'm most proud of Nexus, is that these performance categories are fluid. So this helps us get you into a group on that very first session of the first weekend. But as soon as you start playing 4v2 sideways, or whatever that first warm-up rondo drill is, our coaches on site are starting to assess whether or not you're amongst appropriate peers. And that's the most important piece. Not that we get all the players into elite or all the players into perform, but that we get players playing with their peers of an appropriate level that's challenging them to be better, while also not making that challenge so difficult that they are struggling. So in that first weekend, you'll be placed into the performance group that you assess yourself in. And then from there, it's very fluid across the next few weekends. I know we'll get a few questions about our previous year participants and where they go. And what we'll do is we'll take into consideration your performance analysis from 2022 if you're returning, along with kind of an automatic bump that we give you with some assumptions that all players get better across a 6 to 8 month period. So, if you were in the middle of 2 categories last year, we would bump you up to the category above. Clearly, like our Nexus Championship level participants would start in the elite category. But again, everything is fluid. In the old version of Futures before this happened, the tricky thing was that you either were at a standard Futures site or you were at an elite level Futures site. And once Futures began each cycle, there was no way to move from one type of site to another. So the great thing about Nexus is there will be Emerge, Aspire, and Perform in Elite groups at all locations, and it's up to the players to really engage and train and get themselves into the category that best fits them. And so if you feel like you have more to give and you have more to obtain, then it's really kind of player-led and self-inspired. Again, this year in Nexus, we will have online primers, and the online primers are really cool because part of Nexus is really setting intention, and you'll probably hear me say that more than once tonight. Nexus is an athlete-led program. We try to keep that in front of our focus in every decision that we make, is that we're trying to do as many positive things for our athletes as we possibly can. And we want the athletes to be doing as many positive things for themselves. So the online primers are a big part of that. It's just a little bit of preparation before the session each week. What happens is once you're registered for Nexus, you'll get some information from your regional managers that explain how you can log on to the online primers. And the online primers go through a couple of different pieces. They kind of preemptively get you ready for the principal, the on-field principal. That's the focus of the upcoming weekend. For example, Go Forward is one of our principles of play, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. You can see Quick Strike is another one, 6-second regain. Some of those principles will remain really fluid throughout Nexus. The other piece of the online primer is a little bit of sports psychology mixed in. We all know that mental health is a really important piece of the world that we live in now, and it's extra important for our athletes. So we will continue to train some mental health aspects of the game, work on some confidence building, imagery, and different aspects of pressure that our young players are under constantly. So the online primer example that you see on your screen is likely to change a little bit this year. We're hoping to revamp and add some content that is new. But we think it's a really exciting part, and we think it's really important that our players engage in this part of it, because again, the more they put into the prep and getting ready for the sessions, the more that they'll get out of the sessions. So now we're going to jump into the weekend focuses. So the weekend one focus, we call them weekends 1, 2, and 3, and then within each weekend we have training camps. So each weekend of Nexus is a 2-day event. The first day of your weekend is the first training camp, and the second day of your weekend is the second training camp. So in weekend 1, we're talking about training camp 1 and training camp 2. And really the overall goal of this is to make sure we've got our athletes placed in appropriate training groups, and then really try to get players jumping into what the framework of Nexus is all about. So it's really that introduction, getting a large group of people focused on principles, having a common language, and talking about the USA way immediately after we start training. We want to make sure that we are hyper focused on this idea that it's an individual pathway, and athletes, are really responsible for their own journey. Last year, we started the idea of player reflective journals. We actually also have some parent reflective pieces that we share, just so that our parents feel like they also, if they're present and watching, are able to get a little bit of a takeaway from Nexus. We are going to even heighten what those reflective journal pieces look like this year. So a big question we get often around Nexus is, how much feedback am I going to get? And we do not do a formalized written feedback form. We've discussed it year over year. It is important to us that we do things in an excellent manner, and we don't feel that it's possible to give feedback in a written format that really is fair to the player. So what we have moved towards is this player reflective piece. And what you'll see this year in Nexus is that we are going to put intentional time in the training camps where coaches will be responsible for making sure that players are writing down some reflective pieces, asked questions specifically, and coaches can give some feedback there that players can jot down and be able to go home and study. So we're really going to try to shore that up and make sure that as our players leave our training camps, they are walking away with some tangible takeaways and things to study to help get them better week over week. You can see the third point on that, and I think this is important because I know we're going to get a lot of questions about different types of sites. So we have some sites, depending on the location and the interest of field hockey in that area, where we have somewhere between 30 and 40 kids. We have sites where we have 60 kids, and we have sites where we have over 100 players. So depending on the size of your total site will determine whether or not your training group is broken down specifically by performance level and age group, or just by performance level. So if you're at a really small site, it's possible that we have, kind of just 2 training groups, one higher level training group and one more emerging level training group, and those could be mixed in age. Whereas if you are at a site that's really large, it's likely that you'll have a training group that is not just broken down by performance, but also broken down by age, because it is important to train age appropriately. So that is something that varies from place to place, and I think something that's important to kind of to stick out. We wanted to get to the goalkeeping right away because we get a lot of questions about goalkeeping every year. It is always our goal to have a goalkeeping specialist on site. I think it's important to understand that we're always in Nexus trying to get the best coaches possible within any local regional area, and that a GK specialist is not always someone that is a goalkeeper by trade. They could be someone that's just trained in goalkeeping and understands the specialized nature of what our goalkeepers need. So I think that's an important piece. But the really important one, and I try to be as transparent as possible here with goalkeepers and goalkeeper families, is that Nexus is not by nature a technical skills training program. It's not like that for our field players, and it's not like that for our goalkeepers. Nexus is really rich in decision making. We play a ton of small games. We want to see players playing at speed all over the field and having to implement the right strategies and approaches and skill approach as well to effectively and successfully compete and play in the game. So we think it's important to point that about goalkeeping. You are not going to come, if you're a goalkeeper, to a Nexus training and have, 90 minutes of skill instruction. It's going to be a lot of gameplay with hopefully some feedback from your coach about the decision making and the implementation of skills. We added a few components last year that allow for a few more like shoot and save pieces to the curriculum, and we're making some updates to the curriculum for this year as well. So it's great for goalkeeping, but if you want skills training, I think the best place to go is to get a private goalkeeping coach. That's just my personal opinion. And just want to make sure we're really transparent about that. So we went through weekend 1, talked about goalkeeping. Weekend 2, which is training camps 3 and 4. Now we really try to build on the environment that we have created. We love for our players to be connected to each other. Hopefully they're meeting people from outside of the area that they particularly live in. They're not their same club or their same high school, but kids from all over. We want to make sure that kids are starting to be able to really kind of repeat the aspects of the USA way, focusing on those principles of play you heard me talk about earlier. Hopefully everyone's a little bit more comfortable and kind of like the nuance of Nexus. And so our small games are really starting to build towards significant player growth and understanding. The one thing we want to point out on weekend 2, and this really applies to all the weekends, but over the first year especially, we heard a lot of feedback that sometimes it looked like we were just scrimmaging. My daughter or myself, I went to a training and all we did was scrimmage for, the entire 90-minute period. And I think it's really important here to just give an example of what a Nexus training can look like. So it is not just scrimmaging. So on this next slide, what you'll see is what we use are called Go cards. So this is directly from the Nexus curriculum. And Nexus Card 12 are 5v5 games. I'm a coach, I'm a high school coach, I own my own business, and I coach individually a lot. So these are really fun games to play with groups. And you can see here on card 12, we can take a 5v5 game and we can create 4 different scenarios within that 5v5 and actually make what looks like 4 different games coming out of it. So if you were watching a Nexus session, for example, it might appear that kids are just playing 5v5 for 45 minutes, but in those 45 minutes, there are scenarios across each segment and different things to focus on. So this is an example of something you'll see often at Nexus. A framework that we start from and then stipulations that we build from so that all of those different aspects of the principles can really be implemented across the spectrum and across the training time. So hopefully, I think we've heard really good things from our players, and we want to stick with that kind of approach for this year as well. So then that brings us to the weekend 3. So that's the final weekend of your regional training. Weekend 3 is training camp 5 and 6. And this final weekend, we are doing final assessments because to move out of weekend 3 into what comes next for Nexus, which is our regional selection camps, it is invite only. So we have to make sure we have a full assessment of all of our players moving forward. We really encourage our players on that weekend 3, if they feel like there's questions that they don't have answered yet or things that they want to reflect on, they've been really working on how to execute better in 2v1 attacking play. And that's been their goal. Make sure we get some feedback from our coaches, pull someone aside, ask some questions. We want to make sure that our players leave weekend 3 feeling like they really have some important takeaways and that they've gotten better and they've really started to think about their development within our program. At the end of weekend 3, as quickly as possible, and those announcements will come from your regional team, we will send out our invites to the selection camps. In every location, we try to wait until after weekend 3 to do that. You can see on the screen, there's a couple asterisks at the bottom that there are always potential exceptions to that rule if the travel to the regional selection event is really significant, requires a flight across region 9 and 10. Sometimes that's an issue. Periodically, we will allow for our selection camp invites to go out prior to weekend 3 in those scenarios. But the vast majority of them do not go out until after weekend 3. We also have a goal of making sure that there's a pretty good at least 2 weeks from the last weekend 3 in any region until the start of the regional selection camp. So we try to make a nice break there. That's not always possible. Obviously, there's inclement weather issues and things out of our control, but where possible, that's always our plan. So then after weekend 3, we have a group of players that will get invited to the regional selection camps. I am very hesitant to say what percent of players that is. In our first year of Nexus, I'm going to be very honest about the first 2 years. The first year of Nexus, we thought that it would be approximately 40% of the athletes from overall across the country would get invited to the selection events. We were pretty close in the first year. Last year, the level of play at our Nexus sites was overwhelmingly higher. And we invited, in some locations, 75% of players to selection camp. So we will do our very best to not limit players that are ready to compete at selection camp. We want to invite as many of them as possible that we can accommodate. So it really is based on how those assessments start to play out as Nexus goes live next March through May. You'll see on your screen that some of our selection camp dates are 100% finalized for 2023. Region 7-8 will be the first one. It's May 13th, 14th. It's in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I think it's important to understand that we try to put these selection camps in locations where we have the best 2 fields together side by side as possible. So for example, if you're in 7-8, you know that we're always going to that location. It's because it's the best facility to hold an event that large. The Region 3 and 4 event is tentatively set for Amherst, Massachusetts at the University of Massachusetts. We are really hopeful that that is going to turn from tentative to confirmed very soon. The Region 9-10 event is a little bit TBD. I'll be 100% transparent. We are trying to go to Chicago. It is difficult for us to get early confirmation at Northwestern. So that one is a little bit up in the air. Again, Jill and Val will be sure to update as soon as possible. And if you have any questions, if you're in that region, please reach out to them. The Region 5 and 6 event will be June 3rd and 4th. It will be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, location a little bit TBD. And then also on June 3rd, 4th, our Region 11 event will take place. And this year that will be in Moore Park, California. Each of the regional selection camps are divided by age group, and each age group has approximately 3 hours of training. So it looks really similar to your regional training camps. The selection camps do. You'll train approximately 3 hours on Saturday and 3 hours on Sunday across each age group. There is an additional cost to selection camp because obviously there's a cost for us to run it. So the selection camp cost is $175 per person. If you are a financial aid player and you are awarded financial aid for the Nexus registration fees, those financial aid fees would carry through to all of our events in the cycle. So that would be for the regional selection camp and then also on to the Nexus championships if we were to make it that far. If you don't make it to the regional selection camp, so weekend 3, you don't make it into that top group, you will also get an email from your regional manager letting you know that that has happened. So everyone will find out post weekend 3 whether or not they're moving forward. The post-selection camp timeline. So what comes after that? Hopefully you've seen through various announcements this fall that the next thing is Nexus Championships, and that Nexus Championships have moved into the first part of July. And we're going to hold that for the next 2 cycles. So that would be for the summer of 2023 and for sure the summer of 2024, and then we'll reassess. We did that mostly to kind of meet the needs of our club group and our individual players. We think that this flow probably serves our clubs a little bit better. So we'll let it go and see how it ends up. A couple of big things for Nexus Championships this summer. First thing is, after we do not announce any Nexus Championship selections until all the regional selection events take place. So if you compete in that Region 7-8 selection event on May 13th, 14th, you still will not find out if you're selected to Nexus Championships until no later than June 8th, which is a Thursday. That's the Thursday following the 3rd and 4th of June, which is our last selection event weekend. If we can get them out earlier than that, we will, but Thursday is the latest. A couple of big things about Nexus Championships this summer. I'm really excited to announce, not for the first time, but here, that we're going to do a large Nexus Championship event. So the Nexus Championships will run from July 6th through the 16th this summer, and it will be comprised of both what is now the Junior Nexus Championships, which is what we're talking about. That means players that are eligible for our junior high performance. And then it will also be the Senior Nexus Championships. So that'll be players that are eligible for our senior high performance, our women's national team. So we're really excited to have some aspirational pieces to the Nexus Championship. If you are there as a 16, 17-year-old, you will be able to stay in the evening and watch some of our women's national team ready players, some of the best players in college, compete for an opportunity to make it onto our under 21 team or onto our senior women's team. It's a really high level of play. There will be some overlap there. So the junior groups will compete mostly during the day, and then the senior groups in the evening. We think it's going to be a festival type experience, and personally, I just think it's going to be a ton of fun. So I can't wait. I can't wait for that to happen. You'll see on your screen the second piece that's important. I'm going to make sure I try to say this the right way. So over the last couple of years, 90% of the questions we get once the summer happens is, what is RISE? And I'm sure some of you have heard of it before. We decided that RISE was pretty confusing, and so we are going to align our age groups for Nexus Championships, the Junior Nexus Championships, with the competition levels on the international stage, because the Nexus Championships is ultimately a selection to the junior national camps, which is our final tryout for those junior teams. So this year, we are going to have a U14 age group, which is the first couple of days. And that will be our 2009 birth years and later. So 2009, 10, and 11 will be U14. Our U16s this year will be just the 2008 birth year, because that's the only birth year that will be eligible for our under 16 national team in the spring of 2024, which is really when you have to be able to try out. And then we'll have our U18 group, which will be this year our 2006 and 2007 birth years, because they will be eligible for our U18 team in the spring of 2024. And then we'll have everyone else in an under 21 age group, because even though you're still in high school, you're technically eligible for U21 tryouts in the spring of 2024. I know this can be really confusing. We want to assure you that our database and all of our internal processing will appropriately sort you into the age group based on your birth year. WebPoint, that you all work with regularly, that we work with, operates through the birth year piece. So it will do all of that automatically. Again, if you have questions about this, please reach out to your regional managers. But overall, it's going to be really great. It's going to make it better for our players. It's going to make it easier on our selectors. I think we don't like to talk a lot about college recruiting, because that's not what we're here to do, but I think it's going to make it easier on all of those other people that support Nexus Championships, and the collegiate recruiting community is a really big part of that. So it's going to make it a lot easier on them. You can see a note at the bottom of your screen. You heard me say it earlier. There is elevated play in the junior pathway. We recognized that through our assessments last year. And because of that, and because of this change in the birth years, we're actually expanding the Nexus Championships in 2023. So the junior championships will go from 640 field players in years past to 720 field players this summer across those 4 age groups that you see above. It will go from 80 goalkeepers in years past to 96 goalkeepers across the 4 age groups. And in addition to that, we are going to work to cap the total number of Nexus participants nationwide. We have a goal of about 3,000 players participating, and we want to do that in order to raise the level of competition regionally while providing more opportunity for selection forward. And all that does is just create opportunity for everyone. So we're super, super excited about that. If you have questions about it, let us know. We want to stress that by capping the total number nationwide, we do encourage you to sign up for Nexus at your earliest moment of opportunity. Last year, we actually had players on waitlist in a couple of regions, and we want to give as many people opportunity to compete as possible, but we also can only accommodate so many players across the spectrum. So we encourage you to, once you get your registration email and things are live, to make sure that you take care of that. I want to end, I've tried not to read what's going on in the chat, but I also saw a couple of questions about criteria and, how do we select and what are we looking for, et cetera. So the entire pathway is built around this concept of the USA way. It goes all the way through to our men's and women's national team. It is like this united approach where we would hope that if you spoke to a Nexus player in Chicago, in Texas, in New Jersey, they would be able to communicate to you some common language that's important. Those principles of play, good takeaways from the field. We really want this united way to change the game. And you'll see on the next couple of slides that we lay out what that looks like in kind of general terms. So for the USA player, that's our field players, it's divided into 4 categories. We also consider potential. That's really hard to define, but we try to look at potential based on, a combination of some of the components of the psychosocial, physical, tactical, and technical. I'm not going to go into detail about what this means, but these things are also available on the Nexus website. When you are assessing yourself in that first piece, if you're a new player, I encourage you to take a look at some of these components. Think about whether or not you are physically fit and strong and coordinated. Think about whether or not you're delivering problem solving in your tactical ability and whether or not you're really consistent in your technical ability. Those are the things that we're looking for across the spectrum with our field players. And then on the next slide, you'll see some of the criteria divided into the same 4 categories for our goalkeepers, but a little bit different in terms of the specifics that we're looking for. Also available on the Nexus website. Our coaches, our selectors, everyone that's on site has full access to all these pieces. In the portions of the year where we are specifically doing selections, then the USA goalkeeper and the USA player slides are literally front and center for them across those weekends. So hopefully that was a pretty comprehensive look at what Nexus is, about how we do it. I know there have been a few questions in the slide. We have a few questions that were submitted ahead of time. And so this is my most favorite part of the night. Casey's going to walk us through kind of a Q&A. And if more things come up, please send them into the chat so that we can make sure that you leave this evening feeling like every question that you had about Nexus has been answered and that you can't wait for registration to go live for yourself.
Awesome. Great job, Liz. Thank you for all that awesome information. We do have a few questions already in the chat here, so we'll start off with this one. Can you talk more in detail what criteria is followed to move to the regional count? Do you need to be at a certain level to be selected, or is it dependent on the number of participants?
So I'll say generally that we are advancing all of our Perform and Elite kids. So if you have moved into the Perform and Elite category at your site, you are likely to move on to the selection camp. I think I had seen a question earlier. I know that we were a little inconsistent with making sure players knew what category they were in last year, and that is an internal fix that we'll make sure is better in 2023. So yeah, and generally we're moving the Performing Elite kids. We also very typically move some of the Aspire level players as well. And it just depends a little bit on how that assessment looks. There's no cap to it. So if you had a site of 60 kids and all 60 players were Performing Elite, we would find a way to move all 60 players to the selection camp. So there do not have to be 4 categories at every location. If we happen to have a place where we just have our very top level kids all living in a locale, it's possible that that happens. Each year we have less and less emerging level players. So most of the kids in Nexus are fitting into Aspire, Performing Elite kind of across the board. I hope that answered your question. We're looking at those slides that we just showed, the USA player, the USA goalkeeper, in terms of the specifics that we want to see, and then advancing based on how you've assessed on the site.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. Next question here, is this co-ed program or just for females?
So Nexus is open to all genders. It is not the pathway for our boys currently. So you can participate in Nexus, and there isn't if you want to kind of try out for boys junior high performance, you could participate in Nexus. There isn't really a place to go forward from. What we do at the end of the year is we send our assessments of any boys that are in the program onto our men's national team program heads, and then they take it from there in terms of communication of what opportunities are next in the boys pathway.
Perfect. This next question is a little broad, but maybe we can start off with just about the Nexus program. So this question is, how should players prepare for the event? So let's just talk about the Nexus program in general.
Sure. So, I mean, I think in general, I want to say and acknowledge publicly that Nexus knows that it's the clubs, it's the high school coaches, it's the private coaches out there that are really doing the bulk of development in the United States. And we are just a supplement to making that happen. And we're so grateful for everyone else that is getting players ready to be in the pathway, because that's important to Team USA. And so I don't think it's anything special that you have to do to prepare for Nexus. I think the difference with Nexus is that it's the one thing that most kids do all year that is individual led versus team led. And so just kind of thinking about what you want to get out of it as a player. And that might be really different and not something that you're asked to think about very often when you're competing in club events, you know, for your club championships, and you're competing at high school for your high school championships. This is really about, you know, what does Liz want to get out of Nexus? What are some pieces of my game that I think need improved, that I know would help me be a better teammate or contribute more positively to whatever team environment I am in outside of Nexus? And then certainly for our players that have a true aspiration to represent Team USA, it's important to really start to focus in on what does it look like to be ready for that opportunity. So a bit vague there. Hopefully the online primers will kind of lead you through that framework a little more specifically once you join the program.
Awesome. Next question here is from Justin. He wants to know if there's a quick answer to who should or shouldn't participate. His daughter just had her first team experience out of middle school. She's done camps, clinics since age 5, participating with the club team and some other experience. Do you think she should participate, or is there a quick answer to that?
I mean, Nexus is like my baby. So for me, the answer is I want everyone to participate. And I think that whether or not you're a player that doesn't have a ton of elite level experience, that might find yourself in that emerge or aspire group, that there's as much for you to get out of Nexus as there is for the player that has aspirations of being on our under 18 team next spring. So I think it's open to all. I think you have to be ready to be challenged in a little bit of a different way. You have to make sure your expectation is not on technical skills development, because there isn't a ton of time for skills development. It's about taking the skills that you have, hopefully tweaking them slightly, but really putting them into gameplay situations and challenging your decision making. So if that's what you feel like is the appropriate next step in your development, regardless of where you are, then I think Nexus is the program for you. We do have a significant number of under 14 aged kids in the program, and I think players that get into Nexus early end up a lot of the time finding this just kind of passion for continuing to get better and advancing their game, because they see players that are a bit older than them that do have those advanced skills, and it just really ignites a fire in them. So I'm hopeful that we make it work for anyone that wants to be a part of it, that has kind of the basic framework for participation.
Awesome. I think a few people might have missed the very beginning. So can you just reiterate, when does registration go live and kind of our approximate dates?
Sure. So we're hoping that any past participants, so that would actually be anyone that participated in Nexus in 2022, or if you participated in 2021, even if you took a break last year, you will get an automatic invitation to participate in 2023. And those registrations will go live on the 4th of January. Will take about a week. And then on approximately the 13th, is that right, guys? 13th of January, we will make registration live for all of our new participants.
Yeah, and we are getting a few questions about when those dates and locations will be available. Liz has probably already said this, but I'll just reiterate it as well. Hopefully most of the locations and dates are posted on our website regional pages. They are being updated as often as we can, getting those solidified as quickly as we can. So come registration time, you guys are very well prepared and know what you're signing up for. Let's see. Next question here from Chris. Do we know who the coaches will be at our assigned location or at our assigned region yet?
I would say generally no. Our coach managers are kind of constantly keeping a Rolodex of who they want to have on site each week. I would say generally there are some minimal requirements to work for Nexus. And USA Field Hockey, we have coach certification courses. And in those coach certification courses, staff learn a lot of things about the USA way that I talked about earlier. And so we ask that they have minimal level 1 coaching certification so that they are able to contribute positively to that kind of common approach to the game. The majority of our coaches are at least level 2 certified. We have a ton of college coaches from all levels, club coaches, high school coaches. We don't differentiate in that respect. If you have a question about who our coach managers anticipate being on site, I think that's a question that you can definitely ask them directly. We try to update the regional sites once those staffs are confirmed, but we are probably not that far ahead this year yet. We will try to get those updated as soon as possible.
Perfect. Let's see. This next question / comment. I understand we don't talk too much about recruitment during our presentations, but as a U18 parent, is Nexus useful for recruiting? So
I'm going to take my Nexus hat off for a second. My own business, I do recruiting consulting as like a kind of a side gig, I guess you would call it. And I spent a long time in collegiate recruiting or collegiate coaching, and we have a lot of college coaches on our team. So I will say that I believe that making it to Nexus championships is one of the best steps that you can take in your collegiate recruitment journey. Prior to Nexus championships, we have a ton of college coaches that are working Nexus. We usually have some good representation at the selection camp. So a combination of coaches that are coaching the camps, as well as some recruiters at those selection camps, depending on the location. But specifically, if you make it to Nexus, the Nexus championship event, it's probably one of the most attended recruiting events on our calendar. And if you followed social media last year, the sidelines were lined with coaches. So it is absolutely a great opportunity to get in front of many schools at the same time. And it's on water-based turf. So there is no other premier event like that takes place on water-based turf in the context of the best players in the country. Nexus Championships, I believe, is absolutely the premier athlete event at the U18, U16, and U14 age groups.
Awesome. We have a few repeat questions here, so just going through them. Liz, can you just reiterate again the coach recommendation, how that's not needed anymore in our quick new process?
Sure. So anyone that did the coach recommendation recognizes that it was clunky. You had to register interest and their coach had to send in their recommendation. So we got rid of it. Now, when you log in to register, if you are a new participant in that registration portal, it will walk you through, purchasing your registration to Nexus and a self-assessment tool that will give you the 4 performance groups that Nexus is, the framework of Nexus, and you will choose the performance group that you think best describes where you are at that moment. And then that performance group will just get you into a group across that first weekend. And then from there, everything's fluid. Nothing is stagnant. You can work into any of the performance groups at your said location based on how your performance goes across the 3 weekends. So we hope that this process is going to be really simplified this year, and that we get very few questions once it goes live.
Perfect. If a player is currently playing up in U16 but is really a U14 player, would they stay in U14 for Nexus?
That's a great question. I wish I had talked about this earlier. So it is important to understand that Nexus, it does not matter where you're competing at club or any other events outside of Nexus. Nexus is an individual player pathway program. And so everything has to be by age group, and kind of this year, even more specifically by birth year, because the specific birth years are eligible for advancement to the junior national camps, which is our final tryout for our junior national teams. So we can share the slide again, maybe, that has the birth years and the corresponding age groups. And we'll make sure that this is kind of plastered everywhere as well, so that we don't get too many questions. But I'm also really conscious of the fact that sometimes I think I might be the only person that can just talk about birth years, because it's something we deal with every day. So we totally understand that people get confused, and want to reiterate again that internally our database will go ahead and export and sort for us based on those birth years. All of that will be worked into the back end of our database. So it's not something that our participants or constituents should have to worry about. It should automatically place you in the appropriate group.
Awesome. And then kind of going along with what's on this slide currently, could you reiterate the purpose of the 2008 grouping being separate?
Sure. Try to explain this without causing confusion. So this summer, in the summer of 2023 at the Nexus Championships, which is really why we break down the age groups. The reason that regionally age groups are broken down is because at Nexus Championships, they must be broken down. And at Nexus Championships, if you are selected forward from that event, you are technically qualifying for junior national camp in either late 2023 or early 2024. That is your tryout to represent Team USA internationally in the spring of 2024. So for the spring of 2024, the only birth year that's of the U16 group that will continue to remain U16 will be our 2008s. There will also be some kids in the 2014 group that can qualify to the U16 group as well. So the 2009s and the 2010s could technically get invited to U16 junior national camp, but the 2007s, for example, will be 17 in the spring of 2024. And so they would not be eligible for U16s. They would actually be eligible for U18s. I hope that makes sense. Those of you who've been around over the past couple of years, we used to call this U16 and Rise. We got more questions about what Rise was than anything in the world. So we're hoping by cleaning this up into the age group specifics and then laying out the birth years, that moving forward, we'll all kind of start to get the hang of it, and we'll get less questions and it'll be less confusing.
Perfect. Last question we have in the chat currently. If you are a past participant, will registering be the same process as to who is registering for the first time?
Generally, yes. The full registration piece will look exactly the same. You will not need the self-assessment, because we will take into consideration wherever you left the program last year. If that was weekend 3, if that was selection camp, or if that was Nexus Championships, we have a corresponding assessment in our assessment profile. And so we will use that. We will assume that you've improved. So we'll give you an automatic little bump for 2023 and get you into the appropriate group from there.
Perfect. We have a few more that popped in. Okay, so let's see. This question from Valerie, just to understand the championships, it's based on age groups, U14, 16, 18. So there are players in the different performance groups in each age group, if that makes any sense.
Correct. So at your home site, there are all 4 performance groups across all 4 age groups. That's correct. Yes. And if you're at a big site, you're more like at a big site, we probably are able to do elite at U14, at U16, at U18. Whereas if you're at a smaller site, the elite group might be a mixed age group. The perform group might be a mixed age group. So it depends a little bit on the size of your site and the interest in Nexus in your general locale.
Awesome.
Hope that answered.
Yeah, yep, that was good. I think we might have done this one already, but I'll ask it again. Are we going to be combining the 2006, 2007 birth years for consideration, or will they be separate in 2 different groups like last year?
They will not. So that would be the change. So in this past year, it was the 2007s were our U16 and the 2006s were our Rise at the time. So this year we're going to fix that problem by combining the 2006 and 2007s because they'll all be eligible for our U18 national team. So that will be one large tournament. There will be 16 teams across that tournament. There will be 2 pools of groups and they'll play mixed throughout the championship.
Awesome. We'll do 2 more questions. I see we are running close to 9 o'clock. If you live on the border of 2 regions, can you go to either one, or does it have to be your home state?
We prefer that players stay in state, but we do try to not make hard lines about everything. So if there is a particular instance or a really good reason why it would make sense for you to be assigned to the location in the opposite state, as long as it's in your super region. So for example, if you're in super region 5-6 and you're right on the border of New Jersey, and it would make more sense for you to attend in New Jersey and Sarah has room at that site, that's something that you could ask her for. If, for example, you're in region 7 and you are closer, you're in upstate Delaware and you want to attend Nexus in region 5, that's a lot more problematic because it's in a different super region. And so then it affects what super regional event you attend and makes it a lot more complicated. So within the same super region, we can be somewhat flexible on a case-by-case basis, recognizing that we are giving choice to players this year. And so sites could fill up a little bit faster. But across a separate super region would be problematic.
All right. Awesome. And I see
the Junior Olympic question, and I just want to clarify that because the Junior Olympics is not something I spoke about. And I don't know if that question is specific to Junior Olympics or around the junior pathway in general. Just to be clear, in order to make it onto one of our junior national teams, you must participate in Nexus. So your cycle starts when Nexus begins this coming year. You participate regionally. From there, you go to your selection camp. From your selection camp, you go to the Nexus Championships. And from the Nexus Championships, you can be invited to a couple of events. You can be invited to the U16 Junior National Camp, which takes place either in late 2023 or early 2024. You can be invited to the U18 Junior National Camp, which takes place at the same time. You could also be invited to the Under 21 Junior National Camp, which is for our oldest players in the program. Under 21 camp is usually around the same portion of year, but at a different location than the U16 and the U18. And then the final event that I didn't mention is the Junior Olympics, which is something completely different. That is hosted and sponsored by AAU. It will be in Iowa City. Des Moines, Iowa is technically the host this year, but our portion of that will take place in Iowa City at the University of Iowa. And the Junior Olympics are open to our U16 and younger players. So we do select for that event at Nexus Championships as well.
Perfect. Amazing answer. As of right now, there are no new questions in the chat. Again, if there's something you guys are just thinking of as we're ending, please feel free to email us at the Nexus inbox. We're happy to answer, hop on a call with you if we need to. Liz, do you want to give any closing remarks?
No, just thank you all for joining us. I'm so proud of Nexus and I'm so proud of what our team does day in and day out. And I I know that you all don't know me personally, but I tell people this all the time, that I pride myself on my personal integrity, and I want you to know that every day we're working hard to make sure that Nexus is a program that your daughters, players really want to be a part of, and that it represents something that makes them better as young players and young, mostly women and men when we get a few. So thanks for joining us, and please reach out with any questions that you have.